welcome Cara Dailey to our ClubFCNY Spotlight interviews. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I met you several years ago, I think in like 2015 or something at the Indie Flute Fest.
That's right.
Yeah. And since then, you have moved to Texas for a while, and now you are in Virginia. You are in the U.S. Air Force Concert Band, which is really cool. You also were the 2016 Piccolo Artist Competition winner at the NFA. So welcome, and I wanted to start, if you could give us, tell us a bit about who you are, but give us like a brief backstory of how did you pick the flute and come to it, and how did you get into teaching the flute?
So I'll make this kind of as in a nutshell as possible, but I was in choir. I was in elementary school music class, and in 6th grade in Texas, you get to choose a band instrument or you get to go into choir. And I loved my music teacher, who was the choir director. And so I remember telling her, I don't want to do band, I want to stay with you. And she was a prior flute player, and I think she saw something in my face, my embouchure maybe. She was like, nope, you're gonna try the flute. You're gonna go on and try the flute. So I did it because I follow the rules. And I remember making a sound the first time, which a lot of teachers, we know that doesn't always happen. It doesn't mean some magical thing when it does. But that band director was particularly excited and signed me up right away for flute. And I just kind of took off from there. I had an amazing private teacher, Judy Pierce. She's still active and teaching in Arlington, Texas. I didn't realize how good I had it with her as my teacher. She's very phenomenal teaching fundamentals and very strict in an encouraging way. So I think watching her, I remember telling my mom sometime in high school, Mrs. Pierce, she just teaches flute for a living. She comes to school and she teaches flute and she goes home and does whatever she wants. I would love to do that someday. And my mom was kind of like, yeah, you wanted to be a psychologist last week, so whatever. But I think that idea of teaching and watching and helping people grow in their craft was always very appealing to me. And I think because I had such an amazing teacher for 6 years. I mean, she was my private lesson teacher, 6th grade through 12th grade. And that consistency and that relationship, I think, really gave me a fondness for flute teaching. And then I remember telling her I didn't want to go into music, and she was heartbroken. And I said, I want to be a nutritionist. I want to, help people be healthier, And my parents said, well, music's giving you a scholarship, so you're going to give that a try. And so again, I follow the rules. And so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And went to Baylor University under Helen Ann Shanley, who's another phenomenal teacher. And she kind of further instilled a passion for teaching, in our lessons. I would play an etude for her, and before she would dissect everything and go phrase by phrase with me, she would say, how would you teach this? Or if a student was having issues with articulation, what are the steps you would take? And so that kind of got my curiosity of the puzzle of teaching, kind of sparked that in my brain, and kind of took off from there.
Great. What was your first teaching gig after you finished college? Where did you start?
After I finished college, I went straight from my master's degree to the University of Evansville, where I was adjunct instructor and was a dual position with the principal flute at the Evansville Philharmonic. But I actually started private teaching when I was a college student. And that experience, I think, helped me. You have to go through a few years of awkward teaching, making your mistakes and learning how to fix things. So I remember my very first student, I was a sophomore at Baylor, and his name was Ariel. I think he was at least 6 feet tall, and I am 5'2" on a good day. So I remember asking him to bend down because I needed to like see his embouchure and like adjust. And he was a great first student because he did what I asked. He came prepared and he was curious. He asked questions. And so I learned pretty early on, when I don't know something, give them the best possible answer I can, go home, do my research, and then the following lesson, expand on that, or totally switch gears and like, oh, that didn't work what I said before, so let's try this. And so I took a lot of that into my first job at the University of Evansville, because being a college student and going almost directly into teaching in a university is a huge leap, because teaching here and there through college and grad school, I feel like you just kind of do it to get a side, as a side gig. Like you're mostly focused on yourself, and your students will get better because you are better than them. But on a university level, you are creating a syllabus. You are working with each student and mapping their progression and choosing pieces based on what they need, and getting thrown into a world of flute repertoire, because there's just so much to learn. So the first couple of years at the University of Evansville were extremely eye-opening to me in those ways.
So when you have been teaching, you've taught different levels of students, college, beginner. Have you done many adult beginners or adult amateur professionals?
I've done just a few, and they have all touched my life in a very different way. One of them was a parent of one of my high school students, and he was so curious. I mean, the wonderful thing about adult amateurs is they are so curious, and they bring much different questions to the table. I think they challenge me the most in a fun sense. And he would pick up on things. He'd ask me, like, my F sharp sounds fuzzy. And so we would talk about like, well, the harmonic series and this and that and the other. And then he'd say like, well, why don't you play it? And then he'd watch me and he'd say like, oh, but you're doing something with your lip. I'm like, I didn't realize, I feel like he would point out things that I didn't notice I was doing. I taught another flute player who, her dad is a very, he's like a jazzer out in New York. And so she grew up playing piano and then some jazz flute. So she was taking jazz lessons and classical lessons. And she was a hoot. I mean, just a hysterical person. And then my final, latest adult student was actually one of the professors at McLennan Community College in Waco. And she was coming back to the flute after like a 20-year break. And it was a very emotional and beautiful, and still is, like a journey for her coming back to this instrument. She is a distinguished researcher. And so to have that research mind that's very well developed with technique that has been, on the back burner for 20 years made a very interesting dynamic in our lessons, because I wanted to treat her like a beginner, but she wasn't. So that was another very interesting challenge for me every week, to how can I help her, and what is she teaching me in the process?
Yeah, that can be tough. I have personally been on a practicing journey, and though I'm not a distinguished researcher, I feel like my brain is in a very different place than where my technique is anymore. So that can be really tough.
It's so frustrating. And I was watching her, you could physically see those blocks happening. And as a teacher, you're like, okay, how do I help without offending, or, because she understands everything happening, but just, it's not quite, so it's all about encouraging patience, and it's hard.
So if you have a student similar to an adult, but maybe a younger kid who is pretty smart and finds the new, like the basic beginner stuff pretty boring, but their technique's not there yet. Do you have any suggestions for what to do to keep them engaged while their technique catches up to where they want to be, playing more fun things rather than, basic scales or like the small melodies that they can currently do without, too much difficulty?
So I'd be curious to know this student a little bit better. I think the first thing is, in order to grab their interest, because a lot of students will just kind of do what their teachers tell them, and that's fine. But for those who don't, I think you have to get creative. So I might ask the student to compose little 4-note chunks and give them parameters. So, here's what a second and a third and a fourth interval are. Like, you get to choose whatever notes, but so have them like build almost their own exercise out of a scale or whatever parameters you set for the student, and then have them do it, like, okay, we're going to do it 6 times fast. All right, now let's put the metronome at 110. Like, can you still do it 6 times fast? Like, give them a part of ownership, and maybe that'll work. Sometimes it just takes a couple chats of, showing them a little YouTube video of a really inspiring clip, like James Galway and his articulation through the Bach Sonata, or Paula Robeson's Carnival of the Animals at, like, I don't know, quarter equals 180. I have no idea what she's doing, but it's like, I guess, 8th note. But anyway, something like that. And then saying, like, they all had to start slowly. So let's just get this, like, get over it, star, and then we can get to our etude. Or, maybe if this student is smart and likes puzzles, like, if you're working through scales and they're bored in the scales, but they're working on Mouquet's Flute to Pan, okay, find all of the scale patterns that match your scale for this week, and then, like, see how fast you can do it. Or, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a balance between cater to them, but you also have to cater to the fundamentals themselves. Like, they're fundamentals for a reason. Sorry, it's not,
As much as you want to make lessons fun and engaging, sometimes there's just, like in everything in life, there's just things you have to do, whether you like enjoy doing them or not, to get to the result and the things that you love to do. So, how has teaching informed your own playing?
I think it's huge. I think that there are so many things that we tell our students to do, and then we turn around and get our flute out and we're not doing those things, like posture or tension in your face or your tongue. Or, I mean, the biggest culprit for me is shaping a phrase, right? There's so many times where I find myself just playing something because I've always played it that way. I mean, especially with orchestral excerpts or whatever. And I'm not simplifying my air just to go to the phrase and come back. Like, I think teaching is one of the most, like, humbling experiences, to look back at your own, to be able to kind of zero in on your own playing and take a good hard look of, like, okay, maybe watching Netflix while I play my scales isn't a good idea anymore because things aren't even. I find teaching just so eye-opening for your own playing. And I think it really helps you to expand your own knowledge of the repertoire, because your students all need very different things. You want to give them pieces that showcase their capabilities, but that have maybe like 5 or 6 super challenging bars. So it's not boring for them, but it's not way above their level. I mean, especially when you're trying to choose pieces for contests, for example, kids are motivated by good ratings. And so you don't want to do them a disservice and pick something that's too easy for them, but you also don't want to give a 7th grader Mozart in D and expect them to just blow it out of the water. I understand there are some students that can do that. That's fine. But, you know, I think that expansion of repertoire is a really cool perk of being a teacher. I mean, you have to put the work in, but.
Yeah, of course. So for the teachers out there who are just getting started, or maybe they've been doing this forever, what sort of advice would you give maybe to the Cara who was just getting started years ago, or the students who are out there who are about to graduate in the coming year or so as they start their teaching journey? What sort of advice do you have for them?
I mean, these flute lessons are way more than just teaching a student how to play the flute better. And I think your role, a teacher's role, especially a flute teacher's role in a child's or adult, you know, whatever life you are interacting with, whatever age, those 30 to 60 minutes a week with this person are really shaping more parts of them than just the music itself. So being that example of professionalism, of flexibility, of good spirit, even when you're dead tired and you're on your third espresso of the morning or whatever, you know, showing up for that kid mentally and physically is so important and speaks the world to them. I did a flute choir, like a holiday flute choir back in Texas, and was thinking for the first year, there's not going to, this was right before 2020. So I guess this was like 2018. I bought all this Christmas flute music, holiday flute choir music, and was thinking like, I'm going to be lucky to get, you know, 8 folks to come in and do this. And it was amazing. All of the flute players from my past, my very first student, Ariel, was like in town, and he came, one of my adult students from Indiana.
Oh my gosh.
Like down in Houston visiting her dad. And so she drove up to Waco to be involved in this holiday flute. But it was amazing to see the lives that I guess I have touched as a flute player, but they have like equally touched my life. So I think remembering, however exhausted you may be, those connections and that influence you have on the student are worth the world. I mean, it's a very important thing we do. I think they are sometimes more open with us because we are somehow more approachable. Maybe we are younger than their teachers or younger than their parents. I don't know. I found that my students are sometimes more open with me about their stresses or fears than maybe they would be with their mom or dad. And it's an honor to be able to help them through. I wonder what it is about like being a music teacher that you connect with your students on a totally different level. Cause like, I loved my AP English teacher from, you know, senior year, but when I go back home and I'm going to visit my high school, like it's the band director that I contact. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know, music has some sort of deeper like connection with our passions in life or something. I don't know. I know for me, it's always been sort of, there's either a piece of music playing on my head or there's music that has always been there in my life to sort of get me through happy and sad times. So I don't know, music is special.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, Cara. We'll link some more information below about you and about the Air Force Band. And you guys can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and watch these interviews again. All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our guests, there's more information below. If you're a teacher, make sure to sign up for ClubFCNY to unlock free shipping, extended trials, and commission for teachers, as well as other exclusive benefits for you and your students. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.